Wonderful. Thanks everyone for joining us for our webinar on the updated manual. My name is Linda Evans, and I'd like to start with our land acknowledgement before we get into our presentation. We are situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie Neutral Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe to share and care for the resources and the waters around the Great Lakes. We further acknowledge that this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase 1792 between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Today, Ontario is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, North America, and we recognize that we must do more to learn about the rich history of this land so that we can better understand our roles as residents, neighbors, partners, and caretakers. We stand in solidarity with murdered and missing Indigenous women, girls, transgender, and two-spirit people. Take a moment to connect with the land that you are currently standing on. Now introduce yourself spiritually. Build a relationship with Mother Earth that provides for all our relations. No matter what part of Mother Earth our family originates from, we all have a relationship and responsibility to the land. Let's build a healthy relationship together. And that's from my good friend Jim Dockstader, who has given me permission to share that as a land acknowledgement. I see in our chat that we have a wide variety of people joining the call from Thunder Bay, Toronto, Prescott Russell, Fergus, Mississauga. We're so happy that you could join. I'm going to turn it over. As you know, I am the program coordinator for Family Group Conference in Ontario, supporting the project of updating the manual, the FGC Coordinator's Manual, with the help of Amanda Lull and the help of Kim Curran. So without further ado, I will pass it over to Amanda Lull to introduce herself, and then I will share our PowerPoint. Amanda?
Thanks, Linda. Hi, everyone. It's great to see some familiar faces. My name's Amanda Lull, and I am currently, I'm just trying to think how to introduce myself. So in the past, I've been a program manager, most recently in Toronto, and part of steering committee member and trainer. And over the last year and a bit, worked with Linda and Kim on updating the FGC manual. So in the past, I've been, for those new faces, a coordinator, started there, a trainer, mentor, and then finished off my career as a program manager in Toronto. So I'm excited to be here and just give kind of a quick overview of where the main changes are in the manual. Some of you will have already heard this little spiel, so if you decide to leave, I won't take it personally. It's the manual prior to this sort of update. The last time it had been done was in 2011. So if we think about how different our world looked in 2011 up until 2025, very different. We were long overdue. We had overhaul of our FGC training for new coordinators done in the last couple of years, and this was sort of the next logical step. It wasn't a rewriting of the manual, so if you have read it recently, I'm going to recommend that the manual, as much as it is a large document, which we tried to not have it grow through this, it is something that we hope you'll use throughout your practice. So I have coordinators who keep the manual as a tool when they get stuck, perhaps before they go to their transfer payment agency manager or coordinator to ask for a question. They might, go to a section of the manual and reread that. And not just new coordinators. We had coordinators, who have decades of experience, and they still find it really helpful to do that. So our hope is that that's how you will use the manual, as this ongoing tool in your practice. And therefore, our world changed so much since 2011 that we thought it was really important to update so that it was practical and relevant to the work that we were doing. As they say in all manuals, as soon as it's produced and sent out, it's outdated. And so keep that in mind. And it's sort of a living, working it's not a living document because we're not going to come back and change it again, but you can see Linda's face. But it is the document that we want you to access and bring into conversation and not store on your hard drive and go, I've taken the training, I no longer need to look at this. And so we started that work, and with Kim and Linda, when they first approached me, we had conversations about what we thought were important pieces or pieces that we thought really needed to be updated. And also we made a plan of how we wanted to garner feedback from the roster of coordinators throughout the province. And so this is sort of just an overview of how we did that. It wasn't done in isolation. It's not my manual. It's really was taken out, and we wanted to start by hearing from folks about the areas that they thought needed to be updated, that those align with the areas that we thought. We then did sort of our first round. I did our first round of edits, and we took that out to consultation groups with mentors and trainers, made another round of edits. I think there were 5 rounds of edits when we felt like we were in a really good spot and it was holding everything we needed it to. We took it out to the steering committee members and asked for some additional feedback, as well as there was opportunity for 2 trainers who hadn't been a part of the previous consultation. We really wanted to get their feedback. All of that was incorporated and sort of sent off in June. And I believe, Linda, has it been fully translated? No, I already asked that. It's in the process of being translated into French language at this point. So today isn't about a consultation. If you have questions or additional feedback, always as FGC, feel free to share that. But the document is sort of updated and complete and in the process of being translated. Linda, anything to add around the consultation process?
Nope, you got it.
Okay, you want to go to the next slide? So because many of you will have already taken the training and probably read the manual diligently, we're just wanting to highlight the main key areas that we really changed and sort of to draw your attention to. Of course, outside of this list is I just see Olyanka and Lisa hopping on. Welcome, guys. Lisa, it's so good to see you. Outside of these areas that I'm going to go over, we updated for things like language. We'd had multiple act changes and even what the acts are called. And so all of that legislation, all those pieces were also updated throughout. But in terms of direct practice pieces, these are the 6 areas that we thought were really crucial and did most of the work around. So I'm just going to go through these quickly for you. So the first one is strengthening and clarifying different types of consent. So, you know, if we remember that the original manual, or this, I think that was the 2nd edition, the last update was in 2011, we have to acknowledge regional differences around the province. And so through that practice, there were some places that were having multiple points of gaining consent. Some places were really using child welfare's consent that they would gain. And we felt strongly that we wanted to have a standard of practice that really ensured that informed consent was being sought after and received at, you know, a specific point in time and throughout. And so we've beefed up how we talk about consent. It is consent in FGC is more than the consent that child welfare gets when they first ask a family about a referral. And so those pieces, we have labeled what the pieces are, and they're in the they're listed sort of as a description in a vocabulary sort of dictionary sense, and then also throughout the manual talk too. I Again, since 2011, there's been a change internationally in family group decision-making, family group conferencing around how we label the phases. And so we thought it was important that we, as in Ontario and on our Ontario model, stayed consistent with that. And so it was really highlighting that there are 4 phases. You'll notice that they haven't really changed from your regular practice. They're just labeled and identified and sort of separated out 2 phases. And so this one was one that we really didn't need to have much thought around. We wanted to stay relevant and congruent with sort of what the international community and the Kemp Center was doing. For number 3, again, the language that we use, and many of you, if you've been on those consultation calls or attended PD workshops in the past, you'll know that there's been this back and forth around the language that we use in family group conferencing. And one of the big pieces was an old term that we used to use called bottom lines. So that's what you're getting an understanding of and developing during your summary meeting with child welfare. And there have been different things that regions will call them, whether they're non-negotiables, guidelines for planning. We thought it was important to really come to one place. And this was an area where we thought it was important that everyone across the province uses sort of what this title now is. And so we, prior to updating the manual, did consultation actually around this question. We did it through the training update process. And so bottom lines, we want you to erase that from your vocabulary. I apologize if you'd never heard it before because you were trained under the new training. Pretend that I'm not saying it. And it's really about getting a good understanding from child welfare around what their concerns to be addressed are. What is it the family needs to plan around? And so you'll see that in the manual that we've spoken consistently around concerns to be addressed. Number 4, so in the previous, this was an area where I always felt the prior adaptations of the model were, we could have expanded a bit around foster parents. I think that foster parent, I mean, we likely all do think foster parents play a really important and crucial role in family group conferencing. And I also have experienced that they can make or break the conference. Not through, ill intent, but really just about the special role that they play and how that interacts the family system. And so we wanted to put a bit more information and some guidance and support for coordinators around how to prepare foster parents. What's the role of foster parents on conference day? Things as simple as, when do we hear from foster parents? How do we think, like all those sorts of things. So that's an area that we definitely increased that wasn't there in the past. Number 5, culture. So interesting piece was when Linda, Kim, and I first sat down and we talked about the areas that we thought might need updating prior to actually going through the manual and reading and highlighting. This was one where we had a big assumption needed sort of a huge overhaul. And as we went through the manual, we realized that because the nature of the practice of family group conferencing, culture is infused through everything that we do. And so it really wasn't this huge overhaul, but it was updating the language and the way that we think about it and trying to talk about it through the entirety of the manual and the work we do as coordinators instead of a separate section and thinking of that as a coordinator, that it's not a separate piece that you think about, it's infused through all the work that you do in every interaction that you have. And so we sought consultation and support and really had a look at that. The last one, virtual service. So when this was last updated in 2011, we might have, I think I did one with Skype and with IMing. That was sort of the virtual max of the way that we offered family group conferencing. And it's now I'm glad that we were able to do this update at this point in time and not a couple of years ago, where I think the field has been able to alter and change as they needed to in 2020 through the pandemic, and then see where things return to normal and where we keep the pieces of virtual practice that really benefit us. And so we didn't want to not talk about it, because it is such an additional tool and supportive tool in the work that you do as coordinators. And so we included that in the manual and spoke to it. You will see that there is an additional link. And so it's great that this isn't a paper manual as it was when I first began, because there's great resources that already exist out there. And it didn't make sense to sort of take those resources and break them down and try to fit them into the Ontario model. So as you're looking through, it's at the very end of the manual, I believe. There is a direct link you can click on that will take you to a tool that the Kemp Center, along with the international community, created. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it because it was sort of our sounding board during the pandemic when we were moving to virtual practice. And so it's sort of an additional piece that I recommend that you have a look at and reference as needed throughout your work. Linda, did I miss anything?
No, I think you said, I mean, this is a webinar in terms of really just looking at the highlights and then just letting you know that it's in the SharePoint and that sort of thing, that we also have links instead of having to go to different documents. It is going to go to the links in that SharePoint group that you're associated with. So if you're a coordinator and a trainer, you can click on those two links. If you were, just a coordinator and not in any of the other groups, you're going to get the manual through that. The manual is no longer on the George Hall Center website where it used to be. So people would, usually go to the George Hall Center website. It's no longer public, and it is really for our FGC community, our FGC groups. So we thought it's such a nice piece where you can have context to the document that you're trying to get. So if you see a paragraph and it says it'll lead you to this resource, like Amanda talked about, the virtual tool. Well, what is the virtual tool? Instead of going to all of the appendices to look up virtual tool, you just click on your hyperlink and it'll bring you right to that tool, which is the benefits of having it in the SharePoint and having hyperlinks. But again, if the hyperlink isn't working or you're having a hard time, please feel free to reach out to myself via email, and I would love to walk you through it. Or maybe there is a glitch and I'd like to correct it as soon as possible, because I'm sure other people may be experiencing the same thing.
And I think because of that, because so many of us have multiple emails or we have multiple roles, to be aware of what email you're trying to access the documents from. So you want to make sure that you're signed in on the email that you would, or the account that you would typically use for family group conferencing that Linda would have. So before your panic arises so much that you don't have permission, say you're at work and you're on break, or you're on your laptop you use for work and you're still signed in on a different email, that it wouldn't be giving you permission, right, Linda? Because it's no longer a public document. So you need to be a part of one of the SharePoint lists to have access to it.
So when I have your email address as your contact, I have one. I just need one email, and that's the email that I use for you to have access to all SharePoint links, including this manual. If you're not, that could be that you're signing in, like Amanda said, with a different email. And if you'd like to change your email address, let me know, and I will change it in the system, giving that new email address access.
And that's another piece around the links. We, really wanted to make sure that we were, there's so much history and so much knowledge that has gone into this document since 1998, recognizing all the people who came before us who have had different additions and updates. And for those of you who've been in the previous manual, I still had it in paper format. When Linda talks about appendices and different forms and different templates, we wanted to, again, still not lose all of the pieces and history that have been in there in the past, but also make it something that seems a little less overwhelming, not quite as large, and update everything. So the links that will take you to documents or consents, these are all examples. So please don't, have a look at it and start to have a panic that it's different than what you use. These are ideas. If what I would encourage and what talks about in the manual is if it's quite different than what you're currently using, we'd encourage you to engage in a conversation with your transfer payment agency or however you get access to referrals to see if it's an opportunity to update language or the nice thing with hyperlinks is those documents, even if the manual isn't undergoing a full update, those documents can be updated. Right, Linda? Because they're
Yes, that's right.
like live links. And so over time, those will continue, to shift and meet the expectation that we need doing this work. And that's sort of where we came to. We've had lots of conversation about consent and the language confidentiality agreements. All of those pieces are given as a resource or a sample through the links in the manual. It doesn't mean that has to be word for word what you're using, but I would encourage you to have a look at what you're using and what the sample is and where are the differences and do they make sense? Is there something that you might want to add to yours? Is it worth a conversation?
Thank you. Does anyone have any thoughts, questions? I mean, we wanted to make sure that we were able to, like our complaint process, and whenever we're doing updates or changes, we want to have an opportunity to be able to share how the process went. And I am so grateful to our working group, to Amanda and Kim, to the mentors and trainers who showed up and said, hey, I'd like to support this. Our steering committee who looked through the highlighted areas and offered their support. Without them, none of this would be possible. So, like Amanda said, it's not Amanda's manual. It really is the province who showed up in terms of feedback on what they wanted to see and what they thought was important for the practice of FGC. And we were very honored and privileged to be able to make those changes and make it more efficient and effective for coordinators to get the access of information that they need to support the model integrity of their service that they're providing. So it really was a huge endeavor. It was, I mean, I think at points I was clicking hyperlinks in my sleep, and rechecking and checking, as you know, and conversing with Amanda and Kim and our working group regularly, to make sure that we hit the mark. And by reviewing it one last time, as we did prior to putting it out there, I feel really positive and grateful for this updated manual. Okay, now we always want to hear from you. I do have, and if you do have another question, but I want to put up our evaluation because how we do is so super important. So I put a hyperlink in the chat, and I'm also going to share with you a QR code because some people really like to take pictures, as I do, and sometimes that's the easiest way to do things. Here we are, and there, if that's easy. So you have two ways doing it. You can take a picture of that, or you can click on the link in the chat. And let me know. Give me a thumbs up when you've taken a picture or clicked on the link. Thanks, Catherine. I'll give you a minute or two. Thanks, Lisa, Mandy. Like I said, this is also recorded, so we'll have this on our George Health Center YouTube channel, and I'll also be emailing it to the FGC community, letting them know where to find it. I'll give it one more minute. I'll just give it 32 more minutes since we're a little ahead of schedule. I'm just kidding. All right. Okay, I'm going to stop recording. But before I do that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining. And again, all of the people who put so much great work into the updating of this manual. Thank you.